We have a culture where it's not okay to call in sick, where the martyr is revered, where we need to be doing more and showing more and making more and buying more and all of the things. Now, what can we do about this system? Well, interestingly, in my book, the way that I go about it is just saying like, look, the system is broken and you're not going to change the system. If you want to try to change the system, okay, fine, but it's going to take a long time, especially in medicine, because nothing happens quickly in medicine. People are very slow to adopt change in that field. And so my thing is take it into your own hands, DIY. You can't change anything about your past. And so remembering that, what would you say to a friend or a loved one or someone who came to you and said this to you, like, I feel really ashamed. I feel so stupid that I didn't do this. I didn't do better when I was younger or something like that. That's what you should say to yourself. There is such a power in just putting your hand on your heart and feeling a pressure there. And I don't mean to sound woo, but I'm serious. And just saying to yourself what you would say to somebody else as opposed to berating yourself, because that's what we commonly do. Our brains are wired to remember the bad stuff and to be focused on lack and on negativity, and we're our own worst critics.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. I'm Bill Yount with my co-host Jackie Cummins-Koski, and today we have Dawn Baker with us. We're going to talk about things like burnout, which is near and dear to my heart and to a lot of high-powered professionals. And across the United States, burnout is a huge topic these days, and it affects most of us at some point in our career. And we're here to learn about its origins, how big of a public health impact it has, and how do we combat it, right, Jackie?
Yeah, for sure. And I've heard you talk about it a lot, especially as a physician. And I would say it impacts a lot of people, honestly, no matter what level they're at. You can get burnout for so many different reasons. So that's why I'm really looking forward to our conversation with Dawn today.
Well, let me introduce her before we get any further. Dr. Dawn Baker is the physician, blogger, author, speaker, and lifestyle design coach. Does she have enough titles? Behind Practice Balance. Through her work, she inspires others to pursue simplicity and happiness in the four realms of balance: work, home, community, and self. She helps physicians and other professionals step off the treadmill of achievement, rediscover their true selves, and cultivate a practice of balance that's right for them. She is the author of Lean Out, a professional woman's guide to finding authentic work-life balance. Dawn is also a certified yoga and meditation instructor who is passionate about off-grid living, homeschooling, fitness, and travel. So Dawn, welcome to Catching Up to FI.
Thank you, Bill and Jackie. I'm really happy to finally be on the show with you guys.
Yeah, this has been a while coming. I was sick. I had no voice, and it's hard to podcast when you have no voice, but you rescheduled with us, and we're very happy that you could do so because I'm burned out. I have been suffering from chronic burnout for a while. It probably started about the time I woke up to the fact that I wasn't financially independent and nowhere near so. It was part of what caused an unraveling for me, essentially a mental breakdown. At that time, I was also sued, and being sued in medicine or anywhere is a completely stressful experience. People don't realize what malpractice risk we deal with, and it's ever present in the background of the important work that we do. So yeah, getting sued, not having any financial independence, not having the ability to exit medicine at a time where I didn't want to go to work. I had a hard time getting out of bed. I was distracted, despondent. It was not a place I really enjoyed to be. It was a pretty dark place to be. And I'm being transparent here because I know that this story is out there, and I want people to be able to be transparent with this story too. So Dawn, in order to understand you a little bit better, I think we should go back in your journey, because you had a journey and an experience also, I think, with the achievement treadmill and burnout. Take us back to your origins and through your story, because I find it fascinating.
Thanks. Yes, I do have a story. I am a second career physician. So I started out as an engineer in my young adulthood. And pretty quickly, I realized that engineering wasn't really going to be the path that led me to fulfillment and was aligned with what I wanted my life to look like. I had a husband who, while we were just newly married at that time, was really into rock climbing, and he got me into it too. And we ended up traveling all over the world to rock climb, lived in all sorts of exotic countries and different locations. And that shaped me, along with also meeting people who were living an unusual lifestyle, but sometimes had professional jobs still. It made me want to do something that had more location freedom and time freedom than your typical cubicle job. And there's nothing wrong with being an engineer. It's just that I was starting to cultivate these values and they weren't in line with those kind of jobs. And I was seeing a kind of path where it was like, well, you choose a specific specialty in engineering like petrochemicals or biotech or something, and then that pegs you to live in a certain location. You need to then go and live in Texas or Louisiana, or you need to live in, for biotech, like Silicon Valley. And I did not want that. And so that married with seeing a lot of different lifestyles and people living with very little resources, both climbers, but also local people, like in places like Thailand and Nepal and Mexico. I ended up getting into medicine. So I went into medicine with this idea that if I chose the right specialty, I was going to be able to get the kind of location and time freedom that I was desiring. But I did lose my way a little bit. It's very easy in the medical culture to get entrenched in the treadmill of achievement. And it's probably true for a lot of career paths. But for medicine, it's particularly true. Medicine really has self-selects for people that are high achieving, somewhat perfectionist qualities, also empathic, like to put themselves behind other people. And also you need to fit in and very much fit a mold. And if you don't fit that mold, you end up sticking out. And that is not a good thing in medicine, like especially in training. So I'm going along in training and I end up choosing anesthesiology. And I get very interested in a particular niche field of anesthesiology, which has to do with perioperative, using an echocardiography machine in order to make decisions in the operating room and such. And I was really good at it because I had this engineering background. I understood ultrasound physics and such like that. And I started getting into research projects. It was like, you need to go do this fellowship. You need to take these echo boards. You need to take the cardiac echo boards. You need to take the anesthesia echo boards. And so I was going down this path. And all the while, as I was doing this, I'm in residency. I'm working 60 to 80 hours a week. I start feeling not very good.
I mean, just to break in for a second and to tell people, residency itself is dehumanizing. I mean,
Yes.
you get indoctrinated into a culture of suck it up, buttercup, and work until you're dropping dead, literally. People don't realize, I think, what we go through to come out the other side. And all they see is the, quote, rich doctor. But in reality, we have been in a culture that is destructive in many ways, I think.
Yeah, if work conditions in some other industry were such like they are in medicine, it would be reportable and there would be sanctions and such like that. So yes, totally agree. My burnout story starts where I was talking before we just mentioned this. So like I started feeling very despondent, started feeling cynical, started feeling like, why did I do this? I could have just stayed an engineer, just feeling regretful, wanting to quit every single day. I had some physical problems. I was very fatigued. I had trouble getting out of bed in the morning to go to work, and I had early mornings just like we all do to go round and such. And I had one medical symptom, and it was that I didn't have my period anymore. And if I had not gone to a reproductive endocrinologist, I don't know how long it would have taken me to figure out that I actually had a full-blown medical problem. I was about 35 because I was a second career physician, as I mentioned, and we had decided, my husband and I, that we actually want to start a family. And we were waiting because we thought, well, we're athletic and we're healthy and we can wait. And then I didn't have this period for over a year. And a reproductive endocrinologist was what set off the cascade of figuring out that I actually had this full-blown brain tumor. It was a pituitary adenoma and it was causing all of my symptoms. And yes, I had this combination of burnout, but I also had an actual medical crisis going on that was causing some of the problems I was having, the deep fatigue. And I actually actually had a really deep depression as well, which was probably mixed situational, like burnout scenario, but then also a lack of hormones because of this tumor that was causing a mass effect. It was causing me to go blind, literally and figuratively, to what was going on. And this diagnosis took over a year because I was too busy also to sometimes go get tests and to go even get an MRI. It took me a really long time to go get scanned.
Well, what people don't realize too is we work sick.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of the cultural things where you have to be dying not to go to work as a physician, basically. And we get used to working sick. And that sounds like what you were doing.
Yes, for sure. It was actually interesting because these were not symptoms that were very visible. It wasn't like I was limping or I had some sort of disfigurement or something like that, but I knew something was wrong with me. I just couldn't figure out what. And I, at the time, had the courage to go and take a period of FMLA with my department. And if I had maybe been in a different department, they wouldn't have been so supportive, but I luckily had a supportive department and they let me take some FMLA to figure all of this out. And I took a few months off, but I didn't even really get my diagnosis until after that period. But it is so hard to do something like that. And I mention this because of what you just said, because when you have something that is even invisible, it's very difficult for people to accept it.
So let me just break in here and say that it's kind of cool to hear some of the behind the scenes, but that image of med school and then Dawn, when you are done with med school and you're having all these symptoms and you're just kind of chalking it up to this rigorous process that they take you through when really there was something very wrong. And then you finally got your diagnosis. That's an eye opener there. You're right, Bill. Most people have a certain image of doctors, and I've never had the medical school experience, and it does sound grueling. There's other industries where it might be something similar, but just kind of interesting to see how it just will wear you down from day one from your training.
Yeah, and it perpetuates or it self-perpetuates on this achievement treadmill, which physicians are used to. So let's take a step back. That story is fascinating, and it did lead to some degree of burnout. Let's define burnout and some of its symptoms so that people can understand. Because one of the questions you ask is, am I burned out? So how do you tell?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and it's going to be different for different people. I gave a talk a few years ago, actually, where I said, I showed a picture of Jeff Foxworthy, and I know that you guys don't know who that is, and some of the young people may not, but it was the comedian that used to say, you might be a redneck if, and then he would like list these funny things. And that was the way that I approached burnout. You might be burned out if some of the things would be like, you are constantly eye rolling. You have this internal eye roll all the time about patients, about family members, about everyone. It's like everyone in your life is annoying you. You're frustrated that your mom is calling and asking if you're going to come for Thanksgiving because you're so busy. I did that. I remember being mad at my family for just being loving. If there are problems at work such that you're numbing when you go home, you're doing numbing behaviors, like you're turning to alcohol, you're doing an inordinate amount of scrolling. I mean, we all do some scrolling because it's very addictive, but you're watching Netflix for hours instead of going to bed, doing those kind of self-soothing behaviors that might be somewhat also destructive and detracting from your health. And then things with your work performance, like, are you having errors at work? If you're in medicine, medical errors are a huge source of morbidity and mortality. And that's why burnout is a very big problem in medicine. But in any field, you could be having errors and causing problems. And also, I remember I had a coaching client once that told me she was very burned out. And she said, one night I was on call and I pulled a baby out with a vacuum because I just wanted to go to bed. So it's like something like that, where you're just doing something that is on the borderline of, is this acceptable care for a patient or like a client or whatever kind of work that you're doing? And you're doing it because you're cynical and you're exhausted and you're frustrated and you're just like, I just can't anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I break up burnout a little bit into short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And short-term burnout can be, for example, for me on a shift where I have an emotionally draining case that sucks the wind out of me on the front end of my shift. And even before the end of a 12-hour shift, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm counting the minutes to the end of the shift so that I can go home and decompress, because what we do is emotionally, physically, and intellectually exhausting. And people, it's not just for physicians. This is true for all work, basically. This is true for everybody. But we're talking about it in the context of who we are. And so short-term burnout can be in one shift. Mid-term burnout is just sort of this dull sense of you lose empathy, just become a little numb, flat-faced. It's almost like Parkinson's disease. You're moving slower, you're thinking slower, you're having a hard time getting up for the next case. And then long-term burnout is kind of like, I think, I want to exit this job. I need to have the financial resources to exit this job. And I think personally, financial independence earlier in your career, whatever career that is, or for a physician, provides better quality of care because you're not burdened by, say, your student loans, which can cause burnout. What do you think?
Yeah, I do agree that burnout is a continuum, and you can define a continuum in different ways. The way that you defined it makes perfect sense. Also, you can say, is someone just slightly crispy, or do they have flames around them, or are they just like burned? And it is a continuum for everyone. I mean, and I think a lot of us are somewhere on the continuum at some point in our careers because we go through highs and lows. As far as the financial independence piece that you were talking about, yes. So one thing you mentioned is wanting to just get out and feeling like you're stuck because of financial reasons. You can't get out of it. And another thing that people do at times when they're burned out is that they will fantasize about going and working like at Starbucks, for instance, or some sort of job where I need an easy job, but they can't do that. And really that feeling of stuckness leads to that severe burnout. Like I have nowhere I can go and I have no control over what is happening to me. The feeling like you don't have control is a huge contributor.
Yeah, I mean, autonomy is huge. What happens in my field is you've picked emergency medicine, you get way down the path, and it's functionally a dead-end path. There's no lateral movement like people have, say, in the corporate world. You are trained as an emergency physician, and you can't go do radiology, really. You can't back up and go down another alleyway. There are a lot of dead-end paths there. Now, you can get into administration, you can do other side hustles, but functionally, for the majority of your high-income achievement, it's going to be in that path, in that specialty, and you're not, say, a general practitioner that can move laterally. So the autonomy piece is huge. I mean, I'm not earning money unless I'm sitting in the chair, and it is not location independent, unless I were to say do telemedicine, which is an option. And so there's so many things that lead to this. But for me, autonomy and able to make decisions over your own destiny, like I don't want to go to work today. I have these side hustles and other sources of income, so I don't have to. And it can be very hard to overcome these limitations. Jackie, I want to hear from you. And you were in the corporate world, and there is corporate burnout. Can you tell us about what you saw? If it didn't happen to you, what you saw in your field?
Well, I definitely had corporate burnout too. So anything you do, I honestly think a lot about waitresses, bartenders, maids, people that work in the service industry, and all the things that pull at them and not just their job. I was a single mom. So when I came home every day, I didn't have the luxury to kind of take it easy. I've got a teenage daughter with the attitude that I have to deal with. So I think a combination of that burns you out. And if you're especially at a job you don't love, I live in Ohio, and in this area, Ohio, Michigan, you got a lot of the car manufacturers where you're working on an assembly line and you're doing the same thing again and again. So not only do you have mental fatigue and burnout, you've got physical fatigue and burnout. And so I just like to say, everyone that's listening, think about what you do and how quickly you probably start to see some of the signs that Dawn mentioned. And then Bill, you were talking about some solutions or some alternatives that you started to think about. Now for me, yeah, I was burned out. My daughter, she had graduated from college before I retired and all of that, but I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do. Could I have shifted? Maybe, but I just sort of made it to where I was able to cut out a little bit earlier. That was one of the alternatives. But if I wasn't close enough to where I could be financially independent, I would have had to think about some other things. But that burnout is real. And here's another thing. I was feeling unsatisfied because when I came home, I was so tired mentally that I had no more room for creativity. So I couldn't even do a lot of the things I liked. I love writing, as you know. I love financial literacy and education. I did some speaking and workshops and things like that. It was hard to make time for the things that I did want to do. And I guess you sort of recognize when you're at the point where you at least need to make some adjustment.
I completely resonate with the creativity part. Left brain is kind of like that achievement treadmill. Right brain is where you want to go at times. And when I'm in sort of a phased retirement now, is one way I try and manage burnout. I've stepped back and have more free time for doing this podcast, for example, which really lights me up. And people at work talk about it, they listen to it. And it is a part of my life that I could never give up now because it's a part of my personality. It's become a genetic part of my makeup, which is part of the problem with being a physician. Identity and what you do gets so tied to it that you don't have other outlets for your identity. I mean, Dawn wears many hats. So she could have one identity go down and she's got 6 others going on for her.
Well, you know what, Bill? Why don't we share where Dawn is at right now? Because she is kind of mobile, which is why she has a lot going on. We can kind of hear it a little bit in the background. But tell us where you're at right now talking to us, Dawn.
Well, right now I am in my RV. I live in Utah and I kind of live in 3 different places. And it's so funny you guys were saying I wear different hats because a friend of mine, I went to my daughter's friend's birthday party the other day and my friend was introducing me to some of the other parents. And she was like, "This is Dawn. She has like 5 jobs." And I was like, "Do I? I didn't really think about that. I guess I do."
You've diversified your portfolio. You've
Yes.
diversified your identity. And we see a lot of physicians or professionals getting wrapped up in their identity and they can't let it go. They get the 1 more year syndrome, the 10 more year syndrome. And I'm kind of in that. I struggle with that. But branching out and developing hobbies, passions outside of your primary monetary reward is pivotal to being able to retire. Retire before you retire is kind of the way I would say it, because you're not going to stop work. I've known a physician that stopped work, became an alcoholic, and died of liver failure. I mean, that's very real. I've known physicians that have been burned out and killed themselves. People don't realize there are significant repercussions from burnout, right, Dawn?
Absolutely. I mean, there's systemic things that affect all people, and then there are things that just affect the individual, like suicidal ideation, substance abuse, divorce, attrition affects both. It affects the person that's burned out, and it affects the organization or the system that they're working in. There's health sequelae otherwise, like you could individually you could be getting hypertension, diabetes, diseases that are lifestyle related that you wouldn't have necessarily gotten if you hadn't been so stressed and been so burned out. And then medical errors, like we were talking about before, are a huge source of morbidity and mortality. And so people are more prone to making medical errors, or if you work in the non-medical field, making errors in your work. If you are an engineer and you do a calculation wrong because you're burned out, that could affect whatever it is that you're designing. So yeah, there are huge consequences.
What I'm interested in too, and let's come back to you, Jackie, is burnout affects women maybe a little differently. And one of your focuses, Dawn, is to sort of help women, empower women in their leadership. What kind of struggles do women have in this arena that may be different from men?
Well, Jackie just mentioned talking about working and then going home and feeling the weight of the things that she needed to do at home. And I think that no matter what you say about roles and modern society, and there's definitely a big mix, women shoulder a huge burden of childcare responsibilities still in this country. And so they feel like they have a second shift when they go home if they have a family. And even if it's not overt tasks that they have to do, there's a mental load of things that they're worried about that are hard to let go of. And so I think we do, as women, have more roles. We just hold more roles in our households than a typical man does. What do you think, Jackie?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. And maybe that is shifting a little bit, but traditionally that's how it was. And we're starting to see some changes. But for the bulk of it, I think that is the case. I know most of my friends and the people that I know, the female in the household has a lot more responsibilities inside the house, or maybe they're the primary caregiver. And in some cases, if you're a single parent, you have to do it all, like I was. I was divorced. And so I was the only one day in and day out when my daughter came home from school and things like that. So yeah, I think it kind of is compounded with most women. Certainly not all. Every household is a little bit different, but the statistics show that women are primarily doing more of the household task and typically the primary caregiver.
And I will also say that I coach women physicians and women professionals. And by far and away, the women that come to me that are experiencing burnout, the way that it manifests for them is a complete energy drain. And it's like what you were mentioning, where they do not have energy to do basic things when they get home from work. They do not have energy to do anything that they love doing or that they previously loved doing.
Yeah, and there's systemic issues here in our society, I think, that promote burnout. And that's one of the reasons you wrote your book, I think. I mean, if you go to Europe, they have 6-8 weeks of vacation. They're known for being more lifestyle oriented. We are hustle culture. We are achievement oriented. And maybe that's part of the entrepreneurial growth economy. It's the American way, for Christ's sake, but it's not healthy. What systemic things do you see? And maybe what systemic things could we do to help people with burnout in the workplace?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. We have a hustle culture, and it extends beyond medicine and law and some of the high octane professions, as I call it. I mean, there's hustle culture in just side gigs and entrepreneurship, and it's all over the place. And it's augmented by social media because we see the highlight reels of what everyone is doing. And you're able to peer into the lives of someone like Gary Vanderchuck, who works 24/7, 365 and loves it and talks about it and celebrates it. Yes. So we have a culture where it's not okay to call in sick, where the martyr is revered, where we need to be doing more and showing more and making more and buying more and all of the things. Now, what can we do about this system? Well, interestingly, in my book, the way that I go about it is just saying, like, look, the system is broken and you're not going to change the system. If you want to try to change the system, okay, fine, but it's going to take a long time, especially in medicine, because nothing happens quickly in medicine. People are very slow to adopt change in that field. And so my thing is take it into your own hands, DIY, as we were talking about before we started recording this episode. Try to figure out what it is that you want. How can you make a change for yourself? Learn about yourself, become confident and cultivate that confidence, which, by the way, you can do. You're not necessarily born with confidence. You can actually gain confidence and practice confidence in order to ask for a different schedule. You can save more money. You can do more things to try to get yourself to 1% better and then get yourself to that financial independent spot so that work can be optional, or at least some roles at work can be optional and you can let those go.
Yeah, I mean, Doc G, our friend, talks about the art of subtraction and stripping away the things that you don't like so that you can focus more on the things that you do like. It's hard to do in medicine. They don't really let you do it. I'm always getting requests for more shifts. And one of the things you have to learn to do is have personal boundaries. You have to be able to artfully say no. It's too much. I need to focus on my family, my life, my health, and my personal wealth. And working more and covering other people's problems is not necessarily going to help me. And you've got to find, as you say, you've got to practice balance. And you wrote this book, Lean Out, in part because you read a book, Lean In, by Sheryl Sandberg. So Sheryl Sandberg speaks to the American culture. Tell us a little bit more about Lean Out, your book, and what does that mean?
Well, lean out to me is refuting the lean in culture, first of all, which is that you should keep going and only take a break when a break is needed. That is a direct quote from that book. So what does that mean? That means like when you're full blown sick. So when I read this, I was like, that's exactly my situation. That's where I was. I don't want people to get to the place where I was, where they realize that they have some sort of full blown medical crisis before they take stock of what is happening and try to take some steps to figure out your own path. And so leaning out, it's first of all, it's that, but then it's also how can you figure out what it is that you want? Because number one, when we have done a lot of delayed gratification, a lot of training and put our needs to the side, we sometimes forget about what we actually want. And I was definitely in that place until I had a health scare and then was able to sit by myself in stillness and realize, like, what am I doing here? And so a lot of people don't remember that. So you have to get back in touch with that. And then you can practice cultivating confidence, like I mentioned, by doing hard things, adding things to your life again, such as like taking a new class, something really low stakes to try to figure out what it is that you're interested interested again in, and that you can do something challenging, that you can learn something new, and remind yourself of that so that when you have the difficult conversations come up, like, I actually don't want to be program director anymore, or I don't want this administrative task anymore, or I would like to go down from 5 days to 4 days, or something of that nature, you are feeling a little more confident about it. And redefining success for you, making sure that you understand what it is that matters the most to you. What are your values? Are you living in line with those values? And what are the metrics that matter in your life and in the kind of things that you want to accomplish?
So I have a question, Dawn. A lot of people obviously, so they're doing the hustle culture and they are working their butts off and things like that. Mostly it's for financial reasons, right? They need to pay their bills and they need the money. Okay. So J.L. Collins, he talks a lot about having FU money, which is great. So what are some of the, I guess, alternatives that people can do if they still need the money? Because like some of the things are only available to you if the financial part is not critical. But if the financial part is still critical, like what types of things could they do to try to combat that burnout?
Well, it's a really good question. And in the medical field, people feel a huge debt burden because a lot of people that are either in residency or they're finished with their residency and they're just in the very early part of their attendinghood career have it like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt. But you don't have to be in medicine to have something like that or to feel that you have a big financial burden, like you're saying. Maybe you have debt for other reasons or you have other kind of school debt. I would say that that's a real issue and we need to get to a point where we're debt free. So you may need to slow down a little bit, and it's okay. I think giving yourself permission to be like, this is a whole journey. This is not something that I have to race to. And I know Bill and I have talked about this before of like trying to turn FI into a race. It doesn't have to be like that. We can take things step by step, and you can do one little thing. You can be paying off your debts while you're still learning about yourself, while you're still figuring out the direction you want to take. And you can be in a situation that isn't exactly ideal, but still want to be somewhere else. It's okay to have that. Everyone has an all or nothing thinking where it's like, well, if I'm not doing this, I got to just, like I was saying, I got to quit and I got to go be a barista. No, you don't have to. You can be not satisfied with the situation you're in currently, but still working towards something better. It's all right to have both of those things exist at the same time.
One of the things that happens with burnout, I think, is you lose curiosity. You become more of a machine. You become more of an automaton, a robot, and it just shrinks you as a person. And then we talked about autonomy, but curiosity really helps. And what also helps for me is a plan. You make a debt plan, you make a life plan. And my life plan, to give an example, is that I'm going to work full time 2 more years, and then I'm going to phase back and start cutting back. And one of the major stressors for burnout for me is night shifts. And I'm 59 years old, and biologically, it's incredibly hard to do this. And they kind of expect it of any age. They expect you to do your night shifts. And there's no deference to being old like me. But I'm in a more powerful negotiation point where I am 80% financially independent. We could retire if we were more lean in our finances, but we're not yet. But I can request day shifts only. And I think the culture is getting to the point where they want to help you extend your career because it's hard to recruit new physicians. And so what can I do to help you extend your career? Well, then that's your leverage point. That's the lever you pull. I can do 6 shifts a month if you give me only days. And I'll do that, or I'll do other things like weekends or holidays because I'm an empty nester. But don't think that you don't have options.
Absolutely. And I have the privilege of being able to read some advanced copies of books that are coming out. And I do want to mention this. Corey Fawcett, who's also in the financial world, has a book coming out. It's either called Finding Joy in Medicine or it's Doctor's Guide to Reclaiming Your Joy in Medicine. And it's all about what you just talked about. He has examples and just stories of people where they're like, I did not think that I could get rid of my Saturday call because no one ever does that. It's like unacceptable. But they did. You would be surprised. You don't have to be always scared to ask for what you want. Think about like, what is the worst case scenario? Are they really going to fire you for asking? I mean, the worst case scenario is they're just going to say no, and some people are going to think something about you.
Well, you talk about confidence, and we have a martyr syndrome. And it's not just in medicine, it's everywhere where it's like, I got to do what I got to do to perform and feel like I'm a part of something. But you're a true leader. If you're working for a true leader, they'll work with you on this. And that's one of the sources of burnout is you don't have a good manager or a good leader. But if you have a healthy leader, they'll say, okay, what can I do to help you be more productive? Because a lot of times, as we've learned, less is more. You can spin your wheels like a 4-wheel drive in the mud if you're trying to move faster and faster faster and faster and accomplish more things, multitasking dumbs you down. But if you slow down and focus on more one thing at a time, you may accomplish more, as I think you're finding in your multiple hats situation, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we didn't even really get into that, but like I kind of went away from being a world traveler rock climber. And that happened when I had the birth of my daughter. I finally was able to start my family a little late. And we ended up not being as into the climbing. We were still into travel, but then COVID happened and we actually bought a 80-acre homestead in the Utah mountains. And so now I have this other thing where I do homesteading and I have chickens and we're doing projects and on this land and kind of trying to improve it and make it something special.
Well, you're a pioneer. You have solar, you have mountain spring water. I don't know what you do for heat. Maybe it's a wood stove.
We use propane. We have a wood stove too. We have both. You have to have backups of everything. So the solar and the generator.
I think you have a geodesic dome with a garden in it, if I'm not mistaken. And you're an hour away from the nearest town. And then you go for a week at a time somewhere to practice as a physician in the quote unquote real world. But I see you as a pioneer, a retro pioneer in some ways, right?
Wow, she is a pioneer. Look at that.
I haven't had anyone use that moniker, but I actually really like it. And I was really contemplating my purpose recently. I have been reading other things. I actually also got to read an advanced copy of Jordan Grummett's new book, which is called The Purpose Code. Highly, highly recommend for everybody when this book comes out. I thought it was great. It really stuck with me. And I've been thinking about it for myself. And I think that being a pioneer as someone who's doing unconventional things in a more conventional achievement-oriented field is my purpose, and all of the manifestations of what that means and communicating that to people and just living the life and being the example.
No, I think you really are. And I second your lauding of the Purpose Code. We've read it too, and we just recorded an episode with Jordan that comes out in the new year. So I want our audience to look forward to that. It is so important to understand the difference between big P purpose of the achievement culture and little p purpose, which are the tiny joys in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're big fans of the Purpose Code. So what I'm hearing you guys say is to try to listen to your body and your mind and your soul if you are even getting close to that burnout point, so that you can start to say, okay, I need to start making some changes. I need to make a plan, whether that be bulk up your FU fund or change to another job or ratchet down. I know when I was working, Bill, you was asking me about sort of my burnout experience. I just know that when I was working, I'd been with the same company for 21 years. And at that point, people expect you to move up the corporate ladder, or that's the normal, I guess, process or career progression. But I was not interested in moving up the corporate ladder. And I thought something was wrong with me. And so I started like rethinking some things, and I had to think about what is it that I do like to do and why don't I want to move up the corporate ladder? And I guess my thinking, my change in thinking and making a plan for something else was that okay, if I'm not going to start making the big bucks by moving up the corporate ladder, I need to do more with the money that I had. And that's why I always talk about I never made over 6 figures and things like that. So I guess that was somewhat a conscious thing that I did. And then I got more focused on what I could do with the money that I had. But if I'd not gone through that process, I don't think it would have been as purposeful to be able to plan my exit without having the 6-figure salary. So I guess the sooner the better in kind of realizing that something's got it. Could even mean just taking a break from work altogether, going back and getting a degree or making a career change. I know a lot of people that did that, but again, you got to have the financial bridge to do that. And that takes some planning.
Well, we also are friends with Jillian Johnsrud, and her whole being as a coach is to suggest mini retirements or sabbaticals from work, which you can negotiate as well, especially women that need to take the time for the birth of a child or caring for another family member. You can negotiate those sabbaticals or take a sabbatical for yourself to be as opposed to do. We get caught up in the doing and not the to do.
It's interesting that you just brought that up because I have used that phraseology in my book and in multiple talks that I've given. I can't recommend enough the books by Eckhart Tolle and teachings by Eckhart Tolle, which really talk about how important it is to recognize that our being is really all we have. The present moment is all we have. It's all we know. It's all we can be certain of, and that you are not your identities.
Welcome back from the break. We were talking about late starter burnout. And I want your thoughts because I had late starter burnout. And I think a lot of our audience, when they wake up to the shame, regret, remorse of not having taken care of their future selves financially, they can get burned out and realize that I'm going to have to work another 10, 12 years to get to financial independence. What would you say to that person?
I think this is a really important point for everyone. But as far as what I would say to that late starter is that you need to have self-compassion. And what we were just saying, the present is the only thing that we can affect right now. You can't change anything about your past. And so remembering that, what would you say to a friend or a loved one or someone who came to you and said this to you? Like, I feel really ashamed. I feel so stupid that I didn't do this. I didn't do better when I was younger or something like that. That's what you should say to yourself. There is such a power in just putting your hand on your heart and feeling a pressure there. And I don't mean to sound woo, but I am serious. And just saying to yourself what you would say to somebody else as opposed to berating yourself, because that's what we commonly do. Our brains are wired to remember the bad stuff and to be focused on lack and on negativity. And we're our own worst critics. So start there.
What's interesting too, in coming back to Jordan Grummett's book, is we talk about understanding our meaning, which is understanding our past. And then we need to turn the challenges of our past that we may get caught up in as woe is me, but turn it into a hero's journey. Turn it into, this is what launched me into my future. Because the limited resource is time, and we've got to live every day. You can't live your life burned out. You've got to enjoy that day because it's not coming back again. You've got to contribute to your Roth IRA because you can't carry it over to the next year. Jackie, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, for one, I am super glad that you reassessed your burnout and it turned into you cutting back at work and deciding to do the podcast. Like, a lot of people thought about it, but you filled a gap. And I can only imagine if you didn't recognize the burnout and you plowed to the end and you never did the podcast. Have you ever thought about almost like a Christmas Carol where imagine things if you never did the thing you were supposed to do? But for me, first of all, thank you, Dawn, for kind of putting a lot of this in perspective. I loved your book, Lean Out. I thought it was very forgiving and looking at that the other side of lean in. And for the financial independence movement, I think it has grown so big. Part of it is because a lot of people are burned out. I was burned out and I probably didn't recognize it as much, but I could not even think about ever going back to another full-time 40-hour job. The reason why you have a lot of titles is because not every title requires exhaustion and doing 50 hours a week. So I've got more titles now, but I'm not doing as much, but I'm doing more of the thing that I do love to do.
Well, you talked about woo-woo stuff, and there are things we can do. And people talk about, okay, I've just got to go meditate and I can go back to work. But meditation is understanding yourself. I mean, basic things like a healthy diet, basic things like getting 6 to 8 hours of sleep and not sacrificing sleep so that you're burned out at work the next day. I find myself, if I don't get a good night's sleep, I am going to be burned out at work. It is a guarantee. And so your diet, your sleep, your exercise, we forget about these fundamental capitals that we have that aren't money, right, Dawn?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my top down, like main things that I try to tell people in the main categories of what to do if you're burnout are to learn more about yourself, remember who you are, get in touch with your values, get in touch with what you want, and then also learn how to question and analyze your thoughts and make sure that you understand that your thoughts aren't necessarily true and you don't have to catastrophize. You can think about what you can control and what you can't control and really reframe uncertainty. And then the third thing is what you just mentioned, which is recovery. Focus on recovery. Step back from I need to be able to do a bodybuilding competition or run a marathon too this year or whatever. Just sleep, eat good food, practice self-compassion, find a way that you can practice mindfulness that works for you, even if it's 2-minute breathing exercise. That is something that you can incorporate into a regular practice. It doesn't have to be this perfect meditation.
Yeah, I can't really run anymore. And I did run a marathon, but I was running away from things more than I was running towards things, I think. And what I do now is I walk the dogs. I walk in the woods. I take that forest bath. Getting outside in nature is such a fundamental, you're there. You're in nature all all the time, bathing in it. And I think in the future, you're thinking about even having retreats on your property, aren't you?
Yeah, that is kind
Ooh.
of my retirement. Again, that word means a lot of different things, but that's like my retirement from clinical medicine plan. Maybe within the next 5 years or something, we will have the infrastructure available on our property because we bought this property as like a blank canvas, basically, but it has a stream and beauty. We need to have some sort of living quarters and some sort of like a community area for people that is weather protected. And once we have that stuff, we could start offering retreats. I would definitely love to do that. I've hosted some retreats now offsite at different people's places, and being able to teach yoga and teach mindfulness and do some coaching, it just really fits with all of that. It's really kind of my vision for the future.
Ooh, that sounds awesome, Dawn. Bill
Yeah.
will be there, right?
Yeah, well, one of the things that's interesting too, we talked about women in burnout. Let's flip the script a little bit, because as a man, I feel like I can't talk about my burnout. That's one of the things that happens in medicine where, no, you can't talk about it. You have to self-isolate it. That's one of the worst things about malpractice is you can't talk to anybody about it. And it's one of the most stressful things in your life. And so men in burnout, I think they suffer silently, or even maybe a little bit more silently than women who are used to being communicators. What do you guys think about a man's approach to burnout and what men might be able to do different from women?
Ooh, you're asking the ladies what
Silence.
Yeah, you're asking women what they think men could do differently. Unfortunately, again, there's that cultural and that societal difference in gender. It does exist. And I know some men, family, friends, or whatever, they're told to chalk it up and to get over it more so than maybe women. I mean, I always go back to community or some kind of group or something like that, especially with today's technology. If it's not in person, is there nothing like that that exists? Like, Bill, you can't be the only doctor that has had burnout that's a male, right?
But we don't talk about it with each other. It's not water cooler
Wow.
conversation. Don, what do you think?
Well, every time that I go on a podcast or get interviewed by a man, they ask me this question because mainly I wrote my book to women, except that it really applies. And this is what I always say. All of the information there, except for maybe some of the very particular fertility medical related information in the beginning of the book, it applies to men. And I don't think there's necessarily something that you should do different. I recognize that there are different roles there. A lot of times there's a breadwinner role. So the stakes seem higher, and that adds a lot more pressure in a different way to a man's situation. So the identities are different, the roles are different that they need to balance. But I think that the information that is in the book really tells you what to do. I mean, there's a guide there. The second half of the book is like, learn more about yourself, figure out what thought patterns are holding you back, analyze your thoughts, figuring out if your thoughts are true. A lot of us go around with our brains spewing things out and we don't even realize that it's going off of rules that are made by other people. And I think women and men are equally prone to that.
Well, I think women are better at asking for help.
Oh, yeah, that's probably true.
Women are better at reaching out to their covey of other women and asking for help and conversation where they just need a listener. You can potentially solve your own problems if you just get them out there and have a good listener that isn't trying to solve them for you. That's when my wife and I get into arguments where you want me to fix it or listen to it. As an emergency physician, I want to fix it. But no, she doesn't want me to fix it. She just wants me to listen as she sorts through it. So ask for help, get therapy, get a coach. I think this is where spending your money on your own education, which is education about what's going on inside of you that's holding you back. Reach out to Dawn, reach out to somebody, right? I mean, this is a great place potentially to end our conversation today, is talking about how do you get help? Who do you ask for help?
There are a lot of options. Definitely the coaching field has blown up, especially in medicine, but really all over the place. I've seen it online in other fields, and there are coaches that are even in the financial world, as far as trying to help people with FI and being mindful. And there are coaches that are specifically for men, specifically for women. There are people that do both. So that's a really good resource. Therapy, again, is another good resource. And there are, now that there is more telemedicine and these kind of virtual rooms like this, there is more anonymous therapy that you can get if you're concerned about ramifications of having a therapist on your medical record. You can pay pay out of pocket and get a telehealth type situation. It's unfortunate that that is still a concern for people, but it is sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they have questions on your applications for privileges. Have you
Right.
seen a mental health professional?
Wow.
Yeah, it's going away mostly, but it's still there in some states.
Yeah, I've been in therapy a long time. It is a wonderful thing to do because it's a relationship that may supplant relationships that you didn't get in your formative years, whether it be from your parents or friends or other mentors. And my therapist is pushing 80 and she's getting ready to retire. So I'm looking at an exit strategy and I'm going to graduate. I'm going to graduate from therapy. I don't think I'll go back because I don't want to start all over again, but I want to encourage men to ask for help. Women are good at it. We're not. And they can reach out to me. I'm happy to help.
There's one more resource I want to mention, which is that a lot of workplaces have an employee assistance program or an EAP, not just in medicine, but in other corporate environments. And as long as you feel comfortable reaching out to that, those are very low cost and they usually have hours for counseling that are outside of normal work hours. So it's more flexible for people that are working.
Yeah. So be sure to look at your employee benefits. I think before I left my company, they had an employee assistance program like that. So those can be helpful. And then Bill, also when we talk to Escaping Avalon, he blogs over there. He talks a lot about mental health resources. And that's a guy that openly talks about it. He's anonymous, but he shares a lot of good information and has a lot of very insightful things that he shares on his blog. So I'll link to that episode in the show notes, but all kinds of resources. And that's kind of what we want people to take away. Women and men, it's like burnout is real. Sometimes it leads to very dire outcomes that are not so great. So obviously the earlier you get that inkling or that feeling that this is just not working, to start to try to address it as soon as you can and kind of make a plan, because you can turn it around. We talked about a lot of different options, but one of those options is to talk to someone and get some assistance with the mental and the emotional part of it.
Well, burnout will manifest itself physically, and people want a medical answer. They want a pill. They want something that's going to fix it for them when they're having chest pain, belly pain, headache. Well, that may be your own brain, your own heart generating those symptoms, because the stress manifests itself in your body. And that's why it was so confusing for Dawn to figure out her brain tumor, was because the symptoms were the same. And you've got to answer the question, is it a medical problem or is it a mental health problem? And we're out there to help you with that. We're both physicians, but being human, just be human, have self-compassion, reach out to somebody for help. It's easy, but it's not simple. Bridging that gap, making the leap is important, because money can't buy you happiness, but taking care of yourself can.
Well, I love both of you sharing some of the behind the scenes of a physician and kind of what you go through in med school. Because so now I'm wondering, it's like, why are they encouraging you, even in med school, to work all these hours? It's like you're doing critical work, life-saving work, but I guess there's just no profession, no industry that is like safe from this burnout happening. But it was just cool to get a glimpse at the life of a physician kind of from ground zero, and this just see, I guess, how likely it is to lead to burnout because of the hours and all the other things that you guys were mentioning.
One other episode I want to turn our folks to is Money Zen with Manisha Thakur. She wrote a fantastic book. She talks about hustle culture. She talks about how investment banking, where they're working you to the bone, is also the same realm. It seems like we want to abuse our youth. It seems like when you have the energy, you're in your 20s or 30s, people want to take advantage of that and push you down by working you too much. So there are some societal things we need to do. There are some personal things we need to do. I think we've had a fantastic discussion about this. It's been very honest, very transparent, very heartfelt. And I want to thank Dawn for joining us to help lead this conversation.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation.
All right. We're going to see you guys next week on Catching Up to Fi. Thanks, Dawn. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brazard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofy.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to FI. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to FI. Cheers.